On this week's Reality Check, whose fault is it anyway? Time to take back control of your actions. We're talking about blame culture in society, taking responsibility and accountability of your actions, building the right mindset around acceptance and consequences, and finally, empowering yourself over always playing the victim card.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
On a bright day here.
A very bright day in Reality Club HQ. What we're covering this week, John?
We are calling it Whose Fault Is It Anyway? One of the things that we all do from time to time is blame others and not taking responsibility for our own actions. The blame culture. It's not
Absolutely.
our fault. It's not our fault. Somebody else's.
It's not our fault. It's not our fault. Why are the potholes in the road?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Why? Who put that there?
Yeah.
Why didn't I get that promotion?
Well, that's because it was your fault.
Yeah. Is it?
No, it's their fault.
Is it about
It's
fault?
all their fault.
Or is it about mindset? And that's what we're going to talk about on this edition. How to take control of your actions. Whose fault is it anyway? Which I think was pinched from a 1980s game show for those of you who are showing our age now. So firstly, should we talk a little bit around blame society? Is that what we're like these days? Are we increasingly trying to, pills and potions? Is it all about symptoms and trying to fix them and not get into the root cause? And is the root cause going back to childhood, values, other things we talk about in the book, usual plug, about good old-fashioned values and principles of take responsibility for our actions?
Well, I think a lot of it is to do with, if I look at my children, for example, if something goes wrong, it won't me, and I'm very, very keen to make sure that, they accept responsibility. I mean, I go to my son's school and it's actually on the board as we walk into school, one of the main things that they should do is take responsibility for their actions. It's consequences. We have to look at the mindset as a person and understand that, it's up to us to live our life. And if whatever choices we make, we've got to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel in society as well, it's a separate subject, but, maybe we're looking around to those people who traditionally would have had those values and principles. I'm not talking about politicians, surely, but others in positions of power who are actually being a bit childish and maybe not really taking full accountability. Does it underline more than ever that we need to go back to ourselves and start to build those skills? And how might we do that?
Well, I don't know, because the main thing we're looking at through all these conversations is the mindset, our own mindset. So if we're going to say, right, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, okay? We then need to focus as that person and need to understand that if he's made that effort or she's made that effort to do this thing, that they have to work. And again, I speak about consequences. One of the biggest things we speak about in coaching is that are we ready to accept the consequences? Acceptance as a person. We speak about acceptance. You've sort of done some study on acceptance, and how we accept the consequences. We talk about various things. Quite an interesting story of between us from time to time where we've had an incident where we've been blamed for a broken cup.
The broken
cup scenario,
yes.
Where the cup breaks. And it's like, well, it was your fault because 5 days ago you forgot to wash it and put it in the right cupboard.
Yeah.
And it fell out of a different cupboard and got broken.
Yeah.
How's that me?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, we have to accept that sometimes it might be nobody else. It might be nobody's fault.
Yeah.
It might just be one of those things that happens. And these things happen in life. And it's like, well, do you know what? It is what it is. We just have to accept it. So I think I'm leaning towards this acceptance and consequences.
It is, but before you even get to that, it feels like you've sort of alluded to the stage before, because a lot of the time, look, in life we talk about as well with mindset and the journey we've both gone on as dads and as people, that we want empowerment in life, we want agency, and that's good. But a lot of the time we don't get to that. We basically disempower ourselves because we say, and this is what we're coming to with the other point, it's not me, I'm not in control of this anymore, you know, and you blame everything else. So therefore, if you blame everything else, you're sort of saying, well, I have no say in it. And of course, we know that's completely false, isn't it?
Would you say, I mean, one of the examples of a program that called you've heard The Apprentice?
I've heard of it.
Okay, yeah. And when they've got all these guys who, you know, and I'll be the manager for this week.
Yes.
And everybody else says, oh well, it's their fault. It's their fault because they're in charge. Yeah. But they aren't taking responsibility, and they cover their own backs. Do you find that a lot? I mean, because I don't work in an office, I don't work in any kind of thing, so I'm a one-man band. But do you find in business that everybody's covering their own backs with emails? Is it a work kind of sort of way of acting as well?
It can be sometimes, and certainly we've seen that. And I know you've seen it, although we work in a slightly different kind of mode with our clients. Certainly we see kind of groups gathering around a particular sort of area of blame. We see people who say it wasn't me, it was them. And I tend to find there are those that have that more progressive mindset that we like to espouse, which is, again, no disrespect to anyone else, but they've learned through understanding, going back to taking accountability, say, well, actually, I'm going to take control of the good and the bad. And then to your point there of actually acceptance of the things they can and can't control, which is the reality of this. Not just the world is bad, things are bad, my life is bad. Why are they doing this to me? It's victimization. Yeah, why am I being victimized? Why have you put me in this team? Yeah. It's actually like, okay, if there are problems, that's one thing over here.
Challenges, we call them challenges, don't we? We don't call them problems. Yes. We like to call them challenges.
If there are challenges, then that's one thing, but look at the cold, hard empirical evidence, look at the facts and think and reflect about the facts. And you talk a lot about, or we talk a lot about self-dialogue as well. I found the people who have self-dialogue, who use reflection, who understand actually the difference between there are things I can and can't control. They've got beyond the, I'm a passenger. You know, the world is kind of throwing me either good or bad scenarios, or, you know.
So what we're trying to, so obviously all these things that we talk about, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at how we get out of this. How as a society, I'm not saying as a society, I don't want to generalise. No. But we all know more than a few people, I'm sure, and we see it in the media, we see it on everywhere, where it's like, well, it's their fault, it's nothing to do with me, you know, I haven't done anything wrong, and maybe it's not your fault, maybe it is somebody else, you know. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about taking responsibility when you have the chance to control your own lives. Exactly. And not blaming somebody for something that actually isn't anything to do with them, but you have tried to engineer a way of making it that other person's fault, or the, you know.
It's the ultimate distraction, really, because you're distracting yourself through several different ways of thinking about life, but fundamentally you're disempowering yourself. So, you know, taking control is accepting that you have ups and downs, isn't it? Is accepting that sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't, whether that's in a work or a non-work context. But taking accountability is important, and to do that, it seems like that is wrapped up. And I'm going to be a bit contentious as well here. Sometimes in wider society as well, we're looking for easy fixes. We're looking for quick fixes, what I call pills and potions. Okay. Whereas actually I think this is fundamental to the other stuff that we talk about in Reality Club, because I think actually if you look at some of the issues that people have, you can go and get pills and potions, you can get injections, you can get whatever you want, but does it actually go back to, have you taken accountability of your actions? We had to have, you know, I had a bit of a Paul wobble. It wasn't a controlled pork pie moment. You know, it ended up with me having a pretty stern talk with John on the drive when we were training, and he said, look, you need to get back on it. Yeah. And that's what I did, but that I had to take accountability there. Rather than saying, I've had a tough week, it's this, that and the other, and maybe I'll go and look at other ways that I can kind of get around this. No, good old-fashioned accountability.
Well, you can say, yeah, I've had a tough week. You can say whatever you want to. If you've done it, if you've been the person that's caused that wobble or that tough week, then to be able to turn around using that sort of inner dialogue and being able to say, but you know what, yeah, I have had a tough week and it's my fault, I'm going to have to sort it out. I'm an adult. It's my situation. I've got to deal with this. Nobody else's fault. It's my fault, and I've got to change things.
But haven't you found that really empowering? I have.
Yeah, to accept responsibility, because, you know, when you speak about control and everything else, we are in control of our lives to a certain amount. You know, we could go into a lot of detail about things that we tend to create that we don't need to, in terms, for example, of not having enough time. We spoke about this before, and all this. You know, we are in control as a person of ourselves and what we do. If we go out and get drunk, we are in control. That's our problem. If the next day we're not good, we can't all of a sudden start turning around and saying, well, it's so-and-so's fault, he shouldn't have got me those shots. You know, because that's what comes out, isn't it? You know, when it comes down to it, he didn't force you. She didn't force you to down that shot.
You shouldn't have asked me to the pub, or I always like your example you give about the dog walking. If you're happy to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a very sort of interesting story about. I don't want to mention well, there's no names to go with it. No, but it was a weight loss group.
Yes.
And one of the women said on there, "Oh, you've done really well this week." We'll call her Sarah. It's not her name, but Sarah's the name for this one. We've done really well, Sarah. You've lost 5 pounds. Yes. Well, what I've done is, it's been really great. I've got a dog now, so we go out walking, and I've lost all this weight. And her friend who hadn't lost any said, "Well, it's okay for you to do that because I haven't got a dog." So basically, she was blaming the fact that she hadn't lost weight on that she didn't have a dog.
Yes.
Okay, so that really is a little bit of a far out kind of story, but it highlights this blame that, well, it's not fair. You've got so and so and I don't. Well, and that's a bigger thing that we have to look at, because it's the social media comes in about what some people have and some people don't. And we're starting to get problems with that.
And look, as we always say, we always get to this point in the podcast and we say, but it's not about perfection, and we're not trying to preach, but I've certainly found the hard way or a way to just go back to basics and accept that responsibility. But it's not about perfection. It is empowering. But let's just maybe loop back round on some of the ways that we've done that. I certainly think, to reiterate, having that inner dialogue. But another thing we haven't talked about, we touch on this again in the book, just to plug it a second time, is decision making. There's got to be a critical part of that. If we defer decisions, going to the pub, as an example, buying a dog, whatever that is, or a decision to go and get some fresh air and go for a walk, whatever it is, if we defer those bigger life decisions, there are a few smaller ones, then actually that's quite critical. So is there something wrapped up in decision making in general that we're allowing others to sort of make decisions for us and then blaming them for our circumstances?
Well, I mean, listen, you can look at it various ways. I know people, I'm sure you do, and other people know people who don't have any drive. Okay, there's no drive to do anything, and those people have regrets for not doing things. Decision making, from my perspective in terms of coaching, takes on many forms, and making decisions sometimes are hard. You have hard decisions to make. You have big life decisions. You have crossroads to paths where you've got to think, this could take me a completely different way to this way, okay, in terms of my life. That decision is your responsibility. And what comes from that is your acceptance should be to say, whatever decision I make, I have to take the brunt of whatever happens from it. We deal with things all the time. We deal with small decisions, snap decisions, things that might not mean anything. It might be something that, well, in the next hour, if I don't do this, this will happen. But there could be big ones. It could be things, like lifestyle changes, job changes, relationship changes. I don't want to be with you anymore, kind of thing. And it's like, well, how many people sit in relationships that don't want to be in them because they don't want to make that decision? They then get down the line and they regret it, and they're like, oh, well, it wasn't my fault.
Well, exactly. So I guess just to cap this off and for viewers or listeners to think about this in a practical sense, if there is something that has not settled well with you recently, maybe something that's happened in your life, John gave a few examples there of what they may be or may not, and that is making you discontent with life, it's making you feel unsettled or
anxious.
It might be anxious or stress. Try and find a quiet corner as we've learnt to. It's hard to find time and space. There's another podcast on that you'll find in the collection, but try and find a quiet corner and maybe just reflect on that for a moment and think, was I in control of that? Or did that happen to me? Or could I have changed this? Or can I change that for the better?
Or can you influence this?
Can you influence it? Yeah. And you don't have to do anything at this point. Just sit and reflect on that and see if maybe it changes how you feel about it.
I think a huge thing, and I spoke to somebody about this morning, was being able, and we all have time, we all have 10 minutes, and we spoke about this in a podcast before, about resetting the brain.
Yeah.
No distractions, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to ask yourself, am I okay? I've got this decision to think about. Here's my time to think about it better. What will happen if I take this course or that course? Am I willing to accept the responsibility of what could come out of this? However, we have to make decisions in life, all of us, especially as adults, if you have children, if you don't have children, if you have a good job, whatever. But really what we're focusing on again is it's down to our inner dialogue. It's down to our mindset to be able to look at this and not shy away from making decisions, even if it means we have to accept responsibilities. We have to tear the plaster off sometimes. We have to make those decisions. If we don't, we'll regret.
Yeah, and if further to that, if you are in the mental driving seat, we've learnt, then you are in the driving seat of your life. And things are always going to happen, but we've learnt that resilience has come through time. It's had to come through time because we've had our ups and downs.
Well, you only have to look at some people in the news or in the media or whatever that have done really well. They've become millionaires. But if you look at their stories behind them, some of them have been bankrupt 2 or 3 times because they learn and they think, right, I am willing to take this on again, and they learn from the mistakes. They learn from making decisions. If you don't ever make decisions, you won't have to deal with consequences. And if you don't deal with consequences, you won't ever learn from those mistakes. And
there's just a final point for me. There's this new sort of terminology of owning things, isn't there? Not people, I don't subscribe to that, but of owning your past and the silly things that we all might have done. Again, you mentioned social media. It's very hard for younger generations now, I think, where that's captured, in perpetuity. But I like the concept of it, which is just taking ownership and accountability for the silly things that we do in life and just saying, okay, I accept that. Let's, I embrace the fact that, one, you accept that you've done something wrong. Don't keep doing it. And I think that's the difference. Don't just keep doing that and say, oh, well, and that's what we've talked about in this episode, blindly just continuing and blaming others. Take ownership of it, take ownership of the now, reflect if you can, have that self-dialogue. And like I said, I think, would you agree, put yourself in the driving seat.
Take accountability.
Yeah.
See how it feels. It's working above the line, which is when we are at our most creative, our most confident, our most positive, when we're actually focusing on making positive changes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make a decision, it feels quite negative because it's not come out the way you'd like it to be, but you know what? You can learn from everything that happens in your life. You can't learn if nothing happens.
Exactly. And that's perhaps what being content and happy is all about,
Eventually.
It's
learning. We have to move forward. We move forward in life.
Excellent. Okay, so whose fault is it anyway? How to take control of your actions. Hopefully we've delivered on at least some of that brief. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much. The figures are slowly creeping up, but it's not about that. It's just about hopefully having this honest conversation with you, joining us in the Dad's Front Room every week. We really appreciate it. If you've got any questions or comments, stick them in below the video, or you can get in touch via the other channels and realityclubhq@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.